at the naval units that were in the Atlantic versus the Pacific had a lot more of obviously the carriers, the specialty units, and Marines, you know. But when you look at actual Army units too, when you look at the actual history in the Pacific, we had a lot of Army units there too, obviously. It wasn't just Marines winning the Pacific War. But yes, at the same time in '44, all the production, obviously, like Evansville and all across the country, that was all that production was definitely right in the middle of hitting its stride, and we were able to support all those troops. So yes, that was happening at the same time over there. Yes.
How was it determined that the U.S. got Utah and Omaha Beach? Was it because of the airborne?
Well, when you look at it, one of the things was that the British, from the very beginning of the planning, from a couple years ago, you can make the argument that they've been fighting this war a long time, and they always had the attitude, sometimes rightly so, that they maybe knew a little more what they were doing because they had more experienced troops. So back in the planning, they did plan on landing here because the main German thrust of the counterattack was going to be there. Okay, so they went ahead and said, okay, we'll put our troops there. We've got a little more experience in everything. We defeated Rommel in North Africa. We've got more experienced troops. So it sort of ended up being that way. It also, to a point, worked out that the staging areas of most of the British units were in these ports over here. So it sort of went right along with that. And then the Americans over here. Once you landed that way, and they were always in that configuration, and you got to look at it this way, the British love to be next to the coast. They remembered Dunkirk. Not that in '44 they would be worried about that, but that's a natural place for the British troops to be. They've always been there. In World War I, they were that way. So I think this was a natural place for them. Also, it actually worked out for them too, is that they had a priority to take care of the V-1 launching sites that were all along here. So they were able to use their troops because the V-1s and the V-2s, toward the end of the war, they were killing more civilians than German bombers and everything. But that's sort of why they were there versus the Americans on the rest of the flank. Now, when you think about it, when you read books about the planning, part of the plan the whole time was for the British to be right here, and then the Americans to go do a sweep here and a sweep into Brittany Peninsula and take those ports. So Patton's Third Army was always going to be activated, and they were always going to take the lead here. That was the plan from almost a year ago. In June of '43, that was the plan too, to have this come here and have a breakout there and go across France. Yes, sir.
On your first slide, all the leaders.
Yes.
What branch was Smith?
He was Army. He was a general, but he was the chief of staff to Eisenhower. So Eisenhower was the overall commander, and this guy made sure things got done, and he did a lot of planning and recommendations, everything. So, in a normal command, you have the main commander, but you got their right-hand guy right there, and that's who he was. There was a lot of, getting this Allied coalition to work was tough, and Eisenhower was good at that, okay? A lot of the actual air support plan wasn't finalized until like a week before D-Day. There was a lot of animosity between this guy and everybody else. As the bomber commander, he wasn't too thrilled about using their bombers for ground support because they basically thought they were going to cause Germany to surrender from bombing them. Okay. The other thing was, we all know about Montgomery with his ego. The big thing about Montgomery is his problem all the time was that after the fact, when he would write about things, he would always make the assertion that it was always planned that way. He was a very good commander. He always kept his options open. He liked a tidy battlefield, which means he was very good at logistics and organization, and he put the right people where he needed to be. His biggest problem was during and after the war, he would blow up his abilities a little bit more, and it would make everybody mad at him. You know. And then one of the things, a thing that's interesting about Operation Fortitude is that Montgomery was head of 15th Army Group, which had 1st Army and British 1st Army. And whenever, after D-Day and in the later battles, Bradley became the head of 12th Army Group. So you would probably say, okay, where's the other 11 Army groups out there? There wasn't any. The only reason they named his Army group 12th Army Group is as a deception, because to make the Germans think there were other Army groups out there, and that was part of the plan to tie their troops down there.
What was that operation that, of the northern part, where they had all the fake, everything, northern part of England would have all the fake stuff that,
Yeah, right up in here. Well, it was called Operation Fortitude. Yeah, yeah, and there was actually a lot of deception operations everywhere. I mean, they had different ones for the south of France, when that was going to happen, if it would ever happen at all. You know, during 43, they wanted them to believe they were going to invade in Greece and Crete and all that other stuff. Yeah, well, they had, I mean, all through there, they had all this bogus radio transmissions, they had blow-up tanks, they had everything like that. So there was all kinds of stuff. And the interesting thing, you know, whatever they did, we can sort of chuckle at all the stuff they did, but it worked. You know, they held, it wasn't until the very end of July and into August that the Germans finally figured out, I think this is the only one they're going to do. And they started releasing units. By then it was almost too late. We had bled them white through here and all the counterattacks and everything. And we were actually also reading a lot of their, through the breaking of their ultra code. We knew some of the counterattacks that were happening too. So, no. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Up at Fortitude, they had Patton up there. He was doing his thing with the Germans.
Yep. They made sure everybody knew Patton was there, you know, and that made a big difference. Yes, sir.
So, I label Operation Neptune, that term versus Overlord.
Overlord was the overall plan. So if you look at the, jump here real quick, if you look at the overall, this was portion of Overlord. Overlord actually was planned all the way to Paris, was Operation Overlord. Neptune was the D-Day landings. Okay, they called that Operation Neptune. And then Overlord was this whole plan. So Overlord wasn't really done with until probably August or so, D plus 90 days. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Was one of the reasons that Utah was easier than Omaha. Utah, they used 25 to 26s. Omaha, they used 17s, 24s. The little bombers went in lower. They could see what they were hitting.
A little bit. The other thing is that they got on the beach and they got off the beach a lot quicker because there was actually a screw up, and a lot of the forces landed a mile away from where they were supposed to land. If they would have landed where they were supposed to land, it was actually better defended at that point. So they actually got a lucky break. And then they didn't have the highways around their tanks either, their DD tanks either. So they were able to get more armor on there. It was really a combination of bad factors on Omaha. They actually had a tough thing, and it was that's why they took as many casualties as they did. But yeah.
Roosevelt Jr., he was in charge of the fort. He said it was rock the fort here, even though we're bombed.
Right. Right. And, you know, and it's stuff like that. You can plan and plan and plan until you're blue in the face and have all that ready to go, but it's one of the things that you don't ever hear about is you are planning to be able to handle those type of things. That if something goes wrong and they're here, then they quickly make adjustments, and people make adjustments to their plans, and you know, that's where you've got that chain of command, and you put people in there that can make those decisions, you know. So any other questions? One of the things that, you know, I think it's interesting to know, like I said, why things were done the way they are, and there's a lot of stuff in the background that goes on, and a lot of all the logistical, all the planning, all you could say the bureaucracy, staff work that's done. There's really a value to that, you know, and that's you see that in the Overlord plans. So, all right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike, for that fine presentation.
Okay.